Hello, welcome to the James Theory. Thank you for joining me today. As you can see, we are relaxing, sitting around the toasty fire. Ooh, that's toasty. I thought today would be a good idea to take you guys back to the 1990s, back when I was a young lad living in Canada. And after all of my chores were done and the cows were milked and the butter was churned, me and my siblings would gather around the wood fire and we would take a look at Nintendo Power magazine. Back then, we did have the internet, but it wasn't very good. So all of our video game information we would get from Nintendo Power. I happen to have some of my old Nintendo Power magazines that I kept. Here's one that we're going to look at today. As you can see, it's a little bit ratty looking, but it's still legible. So I'm going to just give you some of the highlights of this issue of Nintendo Power. This is issue 18. I don't know what year it's from. I could probably have looked that up, but it's too late now. And there's no date on the actual magazine itself that I can see, at least. I know it's from around, I think, 1989 or 1990, from what I can tell. But let's take a look at some of the highlights of this magazine so you can experience the 90s the way that I did. So on the cover, as you can see, we have Dr. Mario with all the little pill goblins, and it just explains what the magazine will have in store for us. $3.50 US, so pretty good price. But as we jump in, the first page, we see an advertisement, light up your tree with power, and we can see that there is a couple of Nintendo Christmas ornaments that are pretty cool. We have Mega Man, there's also a Super Mario, and then everyone's favorite Nintendo character, the classic horse head soldier pointing up in the sky with a very worried look on his face. I don't know what he's from. If you know, let me know. I think maybe Castlevania, but I don't know. So we move on from there and we come to the Player Pulse section of the magazine, which is where everyone wrote into the magazine and they would show your letters in this section here. I'd like to notice how interesting Mega Man looks here. But I guess in this issue, they asked people to write in and tell them your worst Nintendo nightmare. So people wrote in and said their worst Nintendo nightmare. I'm not going to go over all of them, but I'll give you a couple of highlights throughout these letters here. The first one, A Sticky Situation, talks about a kid who was about to beat, I guess, King Koopa at the time in Mario 3, now known as Bowser, but he paused the game, went to go get a Pepsi, and I guess his bird flew out of his cage and knocked over the Pepsi, and then the Pepsi hit the console and turned it off, and he lost his point. These letters, I'm sure a lot of them are true, but I definitely think that some of these kids would make the stories a little more exciting because they want to get into the magazine, which I understand, right? So, you know, it's not just that the bird knocked over the Pepsi and turned the console off. It had to be right before he was facing King Koopa, you know what I mean? So maybe it's true, but I feel like maybe exaggerated. After that, we have a boy here who talks about he was playing Karate Kid for the original Nintendo, and the power went out and he lost his spot, and he had just told his sister that when he was done, she could play Super Mario Brothers afterwards. And he says, God must be a girl. So this event happening has him questioning his entire religion now, I guess. I have to tell you, unfortunately, Trevor Lynn, that Super Mario Brothers is a much better game than Karate Kid on that system. Your sister has better tasting games than you. And then after that, we have a Flushed with Pride story. A mom talks about her kid accidentally flushing a bunch of Game Boy games down the toilet, and they couldn't get them out, so I guess they put Drano down and tried to melt the games, and it didn't work. So they ended up getting the games out, and they still worked after sitting in Drano for like 4 days. And then the mom goes on to talk about how grateful she is for such great products and how happy she is. And her name's Karen, because Karens back in the 90s were much happier people. 90s Karens were great. It's just the recent Karens that you want to watch out for. So, and then the one here I'm going to read you, actually, this one's my favorite. One hot game. One day my brother was playing Double Dragon 2 when my mom smelled a fire. Everyone had to evacuate. So we left so fast that he forgot to pause his game. Smoke was coming from the laundry room, but it was just a lit fire. I love how this kid thinks that his game of Double Dragon not being paused is the important part of the story, not the fact that his house was on fire. But the game didn't get paused. And I like to imagine this kid sitting there staring at his game and back at the fire in his house and then back at the game and contemplating if it's worth leaving the house or if he should just keep playing Double Dragon 2. So, and then on this next page here, more mail, a couple of heartwarming stories, and this thing says, "Are you desperate?" And yes, I certainly am. They're talking about next week's articles. I thought it was like a dating thing at first. Find fellow gamers to date, but no, it's just tell us about your most desperate video game story where you were desperate to get a game, and what length did you go to get said game. After that, we come to the Nestor section of the magazine, which was Nintendo Power's own little comic series. I'm not going to go over it all and read it all to you, but I will just show you what it looks like. And also, back in the 90s, it was very popular to make up stupid-sounding phrases that they thought sounded cool, such as weirdo-matic. So a lot of that happened in the 90s. If you watch the old Ninja Turtles movies, you'll hear a lot of that kind of talk. Pretty lame now looking back at it, but in the 90s, it was cool stuff. Also, pumping iron is for weenies, apparently. After that, we have a game walkthrough of the game Little Nemo, the Dream Master, and I just noticed this little bit of artwork here. We have a gorilla, or the main character, the child, riding the gorilla, and he's got a cigar in his mouth, which I feel like nowadays they would never allow that in a children's magazine, someone smoking a cigar, but that was the 90s for you. Back in the 90s, when I was a kid, if you weren't smoking a cigar, then you weren't living a proper 90s childhood. So very cool, very cool. Okay, now this one actually bothers me, and you guys can let me know if I'm crazy or if I'm going overboard on my frustration with the design of this. But take a look at this Counselor's Corner. This is where they help you with game advice and stuff like that. The way that they've designed this Counselor's Corner, the letters here, they went out of their way to make this C in the word counselor extra long, so it covers both. You see what I mean? Both lines here. And then they didn't even take advantage of the design. The next word, corner, starts with the C. How did they not just take the C off of corner and move it over and make the big long C count for both? It's like they had an idea and got halfway and didn't finish it. I'll even fix it for you here. Doesn't that make more sense to you? I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking too much into it, or I'm missing something. But I just feel like that was a bit of a fail on their part. After that, we will jump over to the gameplay counselor profiles. These are the guys who give us all the information we need to get through these games. I should mention that all of their hair is absolutely on point and looking amazing for the time. This gives you their names and all their hobbies and that. My only issue with these is some of their best NES accomplishments, these things that they claim to have accomplished in these games. First of all, there's no proof of these things. They're just saying it. There's no proof that they did these things. But look at this. Kirk Starr finished Mega Man 2 with one man. I call BS on that. There's no way. With no proof. I've played Mega Man 2, and it's brutal. It's so hard. Getting through that game with one man, maybe like the best in the world, but I don't think Kirk Starr pulled that off. Same with Sean Bloom, claims that he got through Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link with one man. Sorry, I absolutely don't believe it. There's no way. I need proof if we're going to be making those kinds of claims. The game is unbelievably difficult. After that, we have a play-action football section here that explains how to play this football game. And I just like to point out the exceptional graphics that we had available to us on the Game Boy when we were kids in the 90s. Take a look at this is beautiful. We were spoiled is what we were. That looks actually absolutely amazing. So good times on the Game Boy back then. Now, next we come across a section about Castlevania 3, and it's showing off some of the enemies here in the magazine. And I'd like to point out that we have an enemy called Nasty Grant, and he's this little goblin guy. And it explains it. And then right below it, another villain is called Grant Dynasty. So I don't know what the deal is. They're two different characters from what I can tell. What I imagine is that the person who designed the game was probably bullied by somebody named Grant and said to themselves, when I get older, I'm making a game, and every single villain, every gross little monster in the game will have Grant in its name. And that's how I'm going to get back at Grant for treating me so poorly. So that's my explanation. Maybe that's not the case, but I just feel like Grant is a weird name for a bunch of different monsters. So after that, we'll look at this. I don't even know what this is, to be honest with you. I'm trying to figure it out here. This 4-player extra strategy guide. I guess there was some product that they had for the Nintendo where you could play 4 players. I don't know what Nintendo games, it was a 2-player console. I don't know what Nintendo games you could even play 4 players, if there was any. I'm sure there had to be. They had this stupid thing you could buy. But let's just take a look at the image at the top of the magazine. And we appear to have 4 guys enjoying the product. clearly the guy on the left is playing the console, and the guy in front of him is very excited in the red shirt on the right there. But what's missing from this image, would you say? It appears there is, they forgot to put in an actual TV with a game being played. It's almost, I don't know what they're doing. What's going on in this image? Are they just so excited about the product? It looks like they're playing the game, but didn't put the game in. It almost looks like the guy on the left is controlling the guy on the right with the controller. But so I don't know, again, if I'm missing something, but I just feel like it doesn't make any sense. Up next, we have some hot news. In this area here, we have the Simpsons game being announced. I actually had this game when I was a kid for, again, the original NES system. And this was just talking about how the game's coming out and getting us hyped for the Simpsons game. And then it even shows us some sneak peek screenshots of the gameplay. And I love this one right here. Of all the screenshots to show people to get them excited for this game, they chose what almost looks like a glitch in the game. I don't know if he's supposed to be in like a dark forest, but what a hideous image to use to try and get people excited. This game's pretty colorful. Like when you start the game off, you're going through Springfield, and it's very colorful and pretty good looking for the time. And they chose this image to use, so very nice. And then over here, I'm not sure if this is the first time they ever like talked about the Super Nintendo, but there's this little section here, the Pack Watch, talking about the Super Famicom, which was the original, the Japanese version of the Super Nintendo. It came out first in Japan, called the Super Famicom, and then we got it over in Canada and the US as the Super Nintendo. But this is like the first, like, they're just like talking about it being kind of announced, and there's a little screenshot of Super Mario World. But that was like, I don't know, like this might have been the first little like hint into the Super Nintendo, which ended up being the best console ever in my opinion, personally. After that, we have a celebrity profile from Kadeem Hardison. I have to tell you that I have no idea who he is. From reading the article here, it appears that he was in the NBC comedy A Different World. Never saw it when I was a kid, so I don't know. I'm sure he's a funny guy, but I have no idea who he is. So that's our celebrity profile for this issue. Up next, we have an article covering PowerFest 1990, which was a tournament, I guess they did, where you went and competed, and we've got the winners. And here we have Thor Åkerlund, who was he's got a little trophy there. I guess he won something there. And it says Thor Might Thunder at NWC Finals. So we've got our first Thor God of Thunder pre-MCU reference here. And then below that, we have Like Father, Like Son. And we have Bruce and Mike Trogdon. And they both placed and won a trophy at this tournament. Bruce is 34 years old, which is actually how old I am, which is actually weird now that I'm looking at that. And then, so Bruce, the father, he got a 659,000 point score, and his son, who's 10 years old, Mike, destroyed his father's score with almost 1 million points. And I think it's funny that the kid just wrecked his father's score like that. And I like to imagine the car ride home and the father being angry at the son and saying, "How dare you humiliate me? Couldn't you have just like tied my score or let me have the higher score? You had to obliterate me like that. You're grounded." I imagine that's what happened. After that, we have the Nintendo Power Bulletin Board, which is a little cork board looking thing. And this just tells you about different phone numbers and helplines you can use. But it also has a Captain Nintendo hotline where you can call and talk to Captain Nintendo. And by talk to, I mean listen to a pre-recorded message for $1.50. It even says to make sure you talk to the person who pays the bill in your house to make sure you've got permission to call. It is a 1-900 number that I actually called before filming this video, and unfortunately it is out of service, and you can no longer talk to Captain Nintendo in this fashion. But yeah, and then on the back of the magazine we have Four-Wheel Drive, a bunch of kids dressed as the 90s, flying through space in a Jeep, and I don't know why. At the bottom we do have another advertisement for this weird 4-player thing. The same thing that I talked about previously with the guy sitting around the table with no system in front of them. Yeah, so we've got that, and that's it. That's the best stuff out of the magazine. There is more in there. Most of it's just like walkthrough stuff for different games that you probably don't want to look at, but those are my favorite parts of the magazine. I hope you enjoyed watching this. I hope you enjoyed this issue of Nintendo Power. I hope you feel like you've lived the 90s just a little bit. And if you'd like to see more Nintendo Power magazines, I do have more issues, so I could certainly show you some more in the future. Make sure you subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.
Just do the math, the numbers don't lie.